Chapter 0 Introduction.
Silent Hill. A 21-year-old PS1 game may possibly be the scariest experience I've ever had. I recently finished this game for the first time, and I felt like it was all over the place. Sometimes I loved it, sometimes I hated it, and other times it made me question my existence. So I decided to review Silent Hill to commemorate the impact it left on me. Now, I know that I'm not the first one or most experienced to do a review or analysis of this game, but fuck it, this video means a lot to me. I've been working on it for almost 3 weeks. I also won't be talking about the story since I don't want to spoil anyone who gets interested in playing this game after watching the video. And just to be extra cautious, I will only talk about and show gameplay from the first half of the game. Well, and for those who actually want to hear about the story, I'll just say that the way this game handles storytelling was way ahead of its time. So, without anything else to say, let's start this shit.
Chapter 1 Gameplay.
The gameplay in Silent Hill is quite outdated compared to modern games. Things like a fixed camera angle and tank controls being the main reason. Some of you may be wondering what exactly are tank controls. Well, this game came out back in 1999, and back then the analog stick was not the standard for all games. Instead, they used the D-pad to move. What I'm trying to get at is that movement in 3D games back then used to be very janky and rough, and tank controls didn't make things any better. Tank control movement is relative to the position of the character, meaning that if you press up in the D-pad, the character would move in the direction they face. Pressing down reverses them, and pressing left or right rotates them. It's more or less like controlling a tank. Wait a minute. Tank controls. Controlling a tank. Tank controls. Controlling a tank. Holy shit! Okay, I'll stop. I don't want to get called a Scott the Wasp clone. Anyway, going back to the gameplay, I will be dividing it into 3 sections, those being exploration, combat, and puzzles.
Exploration.
Exploration in Silent Hill can feel tedious if you don't follow the hints and clues that the game gives you, so make sure to read very carefully because this game won't be holding your hand. Items you can find in the town vary from ammunition and medicine to a pink ball. Yes, a pink ball. Anyway, a common complaint I see in survival horror games is the backtracking, and Silent Hill does have some of it, but, and this is a big but, I was actually never bothered by it. I thought it was satisfying to go back to a room which was locked and then opening it with its key that was inside a birdcage for some reason. There's also this thing called the other world, but I will go in depth about it later in the video. This game has you exploring 3 main areas: Old Silent Hill, Central Silent Hill, and Lakeside, which is the town's port. You start the game in Old Silent Hill. This area doesn't offer much exploration since most of the roads are blocked. The main attraction of Old Silent Hill is the school, which I will be talking about later in the video. Enemies that you can usually find in here are the Earth Screamers and the Groaners. I recommend ignoring them instead of killing them, since you will be needing a hefty amount of ammo for the bosses. Central Silent Hill offers more content. You can go to the police station, the post office, and the town's hospital. Enemies in this area are the usual suspects, and a new addition, the Romper. Individually, they are weak, but once two or more are added to the mix, you better start running, cause these bad boys will catch up, stun you by tackling and pinning you down on the floor, and after that they will never let go of you. So it's preferable to avoid them at all costs. Lakeside is small and doesn't have any big building like the previous two areas, but it has more explorable buildings such as a bar, a motel, a convenience store, and the lighthouse. This area doesn't feature any new enemy, but what makes Lakeside special is the ability to do a side quest. And let me tell you, this side quest is very important since it will determine the outcome of your game, so it is up to you whether you want to do it or not. For me, the side quest felt like a nice change of pace and a way to take a small break or detour from the main story. Combat in Silent Hill is very basic and standard. You got your typical melee weapons such as the knife, pipe, hammer, and axe. Each one of them has their own ups and downs. For example, the hammer is the strongest melee weapon, being able to kill most enemies with 3 hits, and it also has the best reach, but it is inefficient against multiple enemies since you can't move while charging it for an attack. Meanwhile, the axe deals moderate damage and has a shorter range, but it lets you move while charging it. Apart from the melee weapons, we also have guns, those being the handgun, shotgun, and rifle. Instead of having pros and cons like the melee weapons, the rifle and shotgun are outright better than the handgun. That may sound broken or OP, but Team Silent managed to balance this by making ammo scarce. During my playthrough, handgun ammo was very common, my stock never went below 40. Shotgun shells were uncommon, and the rifle shells were rare to find. In total, I only found about 8 or 9 ammo packs for it. So due to the scarcity of ammo, it is advised to use the rifle only during boss fights. An exception can be made for the shotgun, but make sure to not rely too much on it, and it also doesn't help that the game uses tank controls. Since you can't manually aim because the camera is in a fixed position, the game aims your weapon automatically. And let's not forget that Silent Hill is 21 years old, so expect the aiming to be quite imprecise. Thus, it's inevitable that some ammo will be wasted along the way. Overall, I would say Silent Hill's combat doesn't live up to modern game standards, but that doesn't mean it has aged like milk. The bare-bones combat mechanics and scarcity of ammo makes the game a bit more challenging and difficult, which at least to me is part of the charm this game has and makes it more satisfying to complete.
Puzzles.
Puzzles are a staple and core mechanic in the survival horror genre. Resident Evil and Clock Tower are some great examples of good puzzle design. So, how does Silent Hill squares up against them? Well, the puzzles in this game can be as easy as just finding an item, or as hard as knowing how to play the piano or even knowing all the zodiac symbols. Having hard puzzles is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, every time I solved a puzzle, I felt very satisfied, especially in the zodiac signs one. For a 21-year-old game, Silent Hill's puzzles are smart, and I don't mean it in the way that you must have a 200 IQ to solve them, but in the sense that they are very creative and Team Silent really gave them some thought. Compared to the puzzles in Resident Evil, the ones in Silent Hill blows them out of the water, but that is an unfair comparison since Resident Evil has a bigger focus on action. Another thing I liked about this game's puzzles is that they felt like a safe area where I could rest from running away and dealing with all those creatures. Even the mood and atmosphere in the puzzle rooms felt different. In conclusion, the puzzles in Silent Hill have truly stood the test of time and are one of this game's highlights. Without them, Silent Hill will be much blander and have a shorter duration. And this game is already short. I was able to beat it in only 7 hours. I'm sure that would be considered a long game about 20 years ago, but nowadays that's the length of a Call of Duty campaign. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or nitpicking about it, it's just a small observation. In fact, I love short games since high school drains all your time and leaves you with fuck all to do.
Chapter 2. Visuals and Atmosphere.
This one will be quite tricky to describe. Visuals and atmosphere are what differentiate Silent Hill from other survival horrors. You're supposed to be this run-of-the-mill man stranded in a town trying to survive endless waves of monsters. Now, I know that what I just said doesn't sound that unique and could even be compared to Resident Evil 2, but what makes Silent Hill stand out are two things: isolation and dread. The first thing you see when you start Silent Hill is the endless fog plaguing the town. No matter where you go, the fog is always there. It enhances the supernatural aspect of the town by making it look like desolate and dead, adding a layer of mystery as to why the town looks like that and where did everyone go. And that brings me back to my first point: isolation. Throughout the game, you only get to interact with 4 NPCs through cutscenes and dialogue. Apart from that, everything that involves gameplay has you being alone. It's as if you were on your own personal purgatory and the NPCs served as mentors or angels that will aid you once in a while so you don't lose yourself along the way. Now, compare that to Resident Evil 2, where Raccoon City, despite having a zombie outbreak, still feels lively due to all the chaos and fires being spread. It makes me feel like there is still a hefty amount of people alive. There's no true sense of isolation. Meanwhile, Silent Hill treats isolation in quite a unique way. Since you're not truly alone in this town, it instead gives you the illusion that you are, and when you least expect it, it pulls a rock under the floor, revealing all the things awaiting you beyond the fog. Thus brings my second point, dread. Early in the game, you're given a radio that can detect when an enemy is nearby. You may think this makes things way easier and predictable, but there's something that isn't being taken into account, and that is the fog. Our friend here prevents us from looking farther than 3 meters, so when the radio starts making sounds but you don't see anything, you start to feel a certain type of fear, one that humans have dealt with since the very beginning, and that is the fear of the unknown. Since you don't know what type of enemy is going to attack you or from what direction they're coming, your brain starts filling those gaps of info, and you start anticipating something that only exists inside you. So the scariness doesn't come from the game itself, but from what you yourself make out of it. Since every human being is different, each one of them is bound to have a distinct reaction or response. If you ask me, that is peak game design right there, and also an ideal example on how to do psychological horror in games. Now, before moving on to the detailed part of this chapter, I would like to mention the graphics of this game. I won't bash them or anything like that, it's actually quite the contrary. The PlayStation 1 era graphics add a certain charm, and I would even go to say that it makes the game look more scary and creepy. Unlike the gameplay, I will not be dividing this chapter into 3 sections. Instead, I will talk about one thing, that being the other world, which is possibly Silent Hill's most important and well-known feature.
The other world.
If the fog covering the town represents some sort of purgatory, then the other world is hell itself. Whenever you hear sirens in the background, it means that you're being transported to the other world. Actually, no, it's the other way around. The other world comes to you. Your surroundings start changing. The lifeless and soulless town you knew is now a deteriorated and corrupted hell. Not only that, but also the enemies change. They become more aggressive and their appearance is even more monstrous. The fog is now gone and it's replaced by darkness. But this time, instead of making you feel isolated, this darkness makes you feel unnerved and hopeless. It gives the impression that you are surrounded, and you won't be able to make it out of there. Everything I said is just the tip of the iceberg, since the streets are not the ones being affected the most by the other world. Midwich Elementary School is one of the first locations to visit. In there you find these little shits, also known as the Great Children. God, I fucking hate them. Anyway, what you do at school is solve some puzzles, and as soon as you're done with them, the other world decides to make an appearance. The school's appearance and layout changes. Long gone are the lockers and drawings in the wall made by children, and all that has been replaced by rust and decayed walls, sprayed with blood and other fluids. The classrooms now look like jail cells. The not-so-innocent school we knew of is now this haunted prison, and we're its prisoner. The visual alteration brought by the other world completely changes the atmosphere, but that's not all. Rooms or spaces that were safe in the normal world are now filled with enemies as well, keeping you alert at all times and always having your gun aimed. Alchemilla Hospital is the main attraction of Central Silent Hill. Hospitals are supposed to be places where you go to recover and heal from injuries and wounds, but Alchemilla Hospital is different. It looks like a place where you're sent to die. It more or less feels like a concentration camp, but with formalities. The nurses and doctors will give you a warm welcome and make sure you never leave. Be especially cautious with the nurses. They can easily chain grab you, and it's quite difficult attacking them afterwards, so I recommend long-range melee weapons for the nurses. Unlike the school, the other world manifests in a more direct way this time. You just have to turn on the generator in the basement and go to the 3rd floor. In there a surprise will be awaiting you. The hospital's appearance changes to one of an abandoned asylum with a macabre tone where something went horribly wrong. Some parts of the floor will be missing, forcing you to go through more narrow paths, making you more vulnerable. I would suggest turning off your flashlight. It makes it harder for nurses and other enemies to detect you. The other world adds an interesting flavor to the mix known as Silent Hill. It makes it taste spicier and more lively, but at the same time it reaches a perfect balance and doesn't go overboard with the spiciness. The atmosphere in Silent Hill has aged incredibly well. Countless of other survival horrors have tried to recapture that essence, with only 2 other games being successful, Silent Hill 2 and 3. I'm quite surprised that modern horror games have a less believable and immersive atmosphere compared to a game made 21 years ago. So to wrap things up, Silent Hill gets full marks in atmosphere.
Chapter 3. Sound and Music.
This chapter will be way shorter than the others, since I am no expert in this area, but I have some things to say about it. Sound plays a crucial role in Silent Hill, from the groans and shrieks the enemies make, to your footsteps on the streets. They all build this depressive, harsh, and apathetic ambience. It can be felt throughout the entirety of the game, but at the same time it builds up this frenetic energy that stimulates me to not drop my guard, as if it was trying to communicate to us that danger is always lurking around. The only critique I could give it is that sometimes they cheap out by using sound as jump scares. For example, in the school bathrooms, there's a chance of hearing someone cry when you enter the room. I would be fine with it if it was only done once or twice, but the repetitiveness of jump scares makes the experience a bit less authentic. The music is a weird mix of industrial rock ambience, and it somehow works great, from sad and melancholic tracks like Far, to exasperating and tense like Until Dead. The Silent Hill soundtrack has a song for almost every different mood and occasion.
Epilogue.
In conclusion, Silent Hill reinvented the survival horror genre by introducing a unique and chilling atmosphere. Some interesting concepts like the other world and the dreading radio mechanic. And let's not forget about its experimental sound design and soundtrack. God bless Akira Yamaoka for composing the score for the Silent Hill games. The only aspect where the game falters at is with its outdated and clunky gameplay. But that's kinda understandable since survival horror games aren't known for its great and superfluous gameplay. And most importantly, the Silent Hill games are story driven, so that pretty much tells us where your priorities lie at. Overall, this game gets a strong recommendation from me, and I encourage you to play it, since there might never ever be another game like Silent Hill.